Hello, I'm Bruce DuPoit. Coming up today on News Talk, it may be the only issue to generate true bipartisan support on Capitol Hill, the need for sentencing reform. President Obama in Chicago today throwing his clout behind the push for a new approach to sanctioning criminal conduct. We'll talk with the leader of a local interfaith coalition that's active in this effort. Also, is it safe to eat the meat? A new study is raising eyebrows because of the link researchers found between cancer and some of our favorite foods. And the grand bargain. Congressional Republicans strike a deal with the White House that could mean no budget showdown and no crisis involving the debt cap. We'll talk with Sung-Min Kim of Politico.
From WJLA, this is News Talk with Bruce DuPoit.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. It's great to have you with us again today. We've got a terrific lineup on tap for you. Up first this time, the push for sentencing reform. At a time when the two parties seem to agree on very, very little, it is striking that Republicans and Democrats are coming together on the need for a new approach to criminal conduct and sentencing. President Obama's attendance at a criminal justice forum in Chicago this day underscores White House support for the issue. Kara Gotch is Director of Advocacy for the Interfaith Criminal Justice Coalition. Thanks very much for being here. It is great having you with us.
Thank you for having me.
What falls under the sentencing reform umbrella? What sorts of things are you looking to achieve?
Well, at the federal level, we are very focused on addressing mandatory minimums. At the federal level, about half the people in the Bureau of Prisons are there for drug offenses, many of them, the majority of them, under harsh mandatory minimums. The federal government has probably the harshest mandatory minimums for drug offenses than most criminal justice systems in the country. That's one. There's also extensive use of life without parole, even for people who are nonviolent. We're excited about provisions in new legislation that's been moving through the Senate that would also look at juvenile life without parole and eliminating life sentences for juveniles. I think that's really critical. Legislation, sentencing reform legislation that gives people a second chance and doesn't just lock them up and throw away the key.
What has brought us to this point of saying the system's broken, it's not as good as it could be, we can do better, and to, again, as we mentioned at the outset, having a moment, I know you hope it lasts longer than a moment, where the two parties actually see the same thing at the same time and have come together to try to figure out a better way forward?
Well, historically, criminal justice reform is a hot, controversial issue. People don't want to touch it. Politicians don't want to touch it. But I think over the years, mass incarceration just has cost us not just expensive cost of corrections, but also morally it's cost us. It's put away fathers and mothers, taking them far too long from their children, from neighborhoods, and they're not contributing to communities. Once you go into the system, it's often hard to come out and be successful because there's so many obstacles, collateral consequences to incarceration that make someone's reentry and return very difficult. And so that's part of the reason why the faith community has gotten involved, because we are concerned about the individuals who are impacted by the criminal justice system, because the burden of the criminal justice system lives with you for your lifetime, and it can lead to generational cycles of coming in and out of the criminal justice system. We want to see an end to that. We
have the laws we have because a majority of our elected leaders decided at a given point that this reflects our ability to learn from the past and put in place a set of rules that'll serve us going forward. Where did things run off the rails? How did we end up coming out of a time when we thought that certain sanctions for certain crimes deserved whatever punishment you're now trying to alter? What is it about our experience that hasn't played out as we expected?
Well, we have such a large proportion of nonviolent, particularly drug offenders in the criminal justice system who are incarcerated. It hasn't stopped drug abuse. Drugs are still as prevalent as they always were. They're as easy to get as they always were, and in many circumstances they're more potent than they were. Crime doesn't, incarceration doesn't address addiction. Addiction is a public health concern, and we think that the focus should be on helping people get off of drugs, providing treatment, access to treatment. Incarceration doesn't treat anyone who has an addiction issue. Also, we have to look at the societal problems that lead people to commit crime, to become someone who perhaps sell drugs, as that is their sort of way of earning money, and we need to find more gainful employment opportunities for people.
If folks had a better educational opportunity and more employment opportunity younger in life, would they have ever ended up doing the things they got nailed for doing?
I think there's a whole host of social issues that contribute to crime. Certainly economic opportunities, educational opportunities are part of that, access to health care, access to mental health care treatment, more resources in communities for children who are after school programming. I mean, it's a sort of a countless, endless list of programming that needs to be addressed.
And when you look at how expensive incarceration is, it begs the question, what could we be doing with this money that would be the proverbial win-win-win rippling through society?
Education's a lot less expensive than incarceration.
Let me open up the phone lines now, because this is an issue I know you have feelings and thoughts about as we continue to talk with Kara Gotch about the issue of sentencing reform. There's a bipartisan push now on Capitol Hill and broadly for sentencing reform. What will come of it? Time will tell, but let's get your thoughts and opinions into the mix right now. We've posted the number to the bottom of the screen, and we hope those of you watching in the 11 a.m. hour will join the conversation. 703-387-1020 is the number here. Please grab an open line in the next minute or so. I would love to hear from you. We'll go to the phones as your questions and comments come in. When you look at the statistics and the extent to which America locks up more of its people than the vast majority of other nations, does this underscore the need to try something new?
Absolutely. There is no reason to believe that people in the United States are more evil than in any other part of the world, yet we rely on incarceration and excessive punishment more than other countries. Not only do we incarcerate more people, but our sentences are far longer than most other countries. And I think there needs to be an evaluation of the wisdom of that. It's very expensive, but it also has a long-term impact on the lives of people who are incarcerated in the families and communities that they leave behind. There's got to be a reevaluation of what we're doing, because locking people up doesn't solve our problems. It just, in many circumstances, just perpetuates them.
How do we take, how are you attempting to take the themes and the principles that you've laid out here and craft it into language that can then end up in our courtrooms and throughout our criminal justice system more broadly, so that we get better outcomes when people do bad things?
Well, we need a comprehensive approach to address this issue. I certainly think legislation that was introduced in the Senate and just last week passed out of the Senate's Judiciary Committee, the Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act, is a good first step. It addresses mandatory minimums for drug offenses at the federal level, but it would also invest in programming for people who are incarcerated in the Bureau of Prisons and allow those folks who successfully participate in rehabilitation to exit a penal institution and enter earlier into community corrections, so they can form bonds with their family members, they can find employment in the community, and the transition from incarceration to the outside world is eased through programs like that.
In terms of the box that people have to check when they've been convicted and served time, and what that can represent as they then go into the job market, is that on your radar?
Absolutely. Fair chance hiring is really critically important for people who've come out of the criminal justice system. It's very difficult to find a job in this day and age, but if you have a criminal conviction, it's even that much harder, because there is bias associated with that. And so taking that question from an application and waiting until someone has an opportunity to interview for a job and really present their skills so that the bias of that criminal conviction doesn't weigh in on the decision is really important.
Although do you agree that there has to be some ability of a potential employer to know something about the person's background? So a bank, and I apologize, I've used this example before, but a bank shouldn't be forced to hire a former bank robber as a bank teller? Absolutely,
and I think everybody thinks that security precautions are necessary, but there are many jobs that don't require you to handle money, for example, and those questions can be asked at a later date. No one's saying they shouldn't ever be asked, but later on in the hiring process.
We'll go over a bit on time so we can get at least one call in. Hi, Natasha, picking up on line 2. Natasha, you're on the air. Jump right in. You're on the air.
Hi, I just wanted to comment that I am for the reform, and I am so concerned because I'm dealing with ex-offenders as well. They have a problem getting employment simply because the employers are looking at background checks. And if you have a blemish, which we call it today, they cannot get a job. We have been trying to get people certified in food handling. We've been trying to get them certified in customer service and some of the IT jobs. And it's very hard because employees are still asking that number one question. Have you ever been arrested in the past 5, 8, or 10 to 12 years?
Do you have
a major problem?
I appreciate your weighing in, given your expertise and your experience in the area. Do you have anything to say to employers who might be listening that feeds off of the experience that folks with jobs who've been willing to take a chance, that it might kind of reassure them that in certain situations it's okay to give someone that second chance? Natasha?
Yeah. For employers today, please give people an opportunity. If they have not had a hard offense, please give them an opportunity to get back into our society to work and contribute. They want to vote and they want to work and they want to earn a living for their families. That's the major concern that I have right now.
Thanks very much. Interesting, a very interesting perspective.
Absolutely. As a person of faith and as someone who works with the faith community, recognizing the value that all of us have is critically important.
Can you talk about the interfaith element of the work that you all are doing?
Sure. I work with the Interfaith Criminal Justice Coalition. It's a coalition of about 50 religious denominations and faith-based organizations focused on criminal justice reform, primarily at the federal level. And we advocate on Capitol Hill to advance policy reform.
We'll keep in touch and we'll talk about this issue more with you as it moves through the process. There was a hearing just the other day, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, on Thursday.
All right, so we'll keep in touch and we'll talk about this issue
Wonderful.
more. Kara Gotch of the Interfaith Criminal Justice Coalition. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank
Talk
you.
with you again. We'll step aside, back with more in a moment.